Okay, you've made it to the last synopsis. This is chapter 15. Chapter 15, I'm only going to talk about one segment of this, this chapter, which is the Nash equilibrium. And I'm going to talk about the classic prisoner's dilemma, which is an example of the Nash equilibrium. So you might have seen the movie called A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe. It's probably 20 years ago or so. That's about the economist who developed this game theory and the Nash equilibrium, the economist Dr. Nash, and he won the Nobel Prize for it. This game theory is used in business. It's used in wartime strategy. Just about any type of negotiation uses this game theory or this Nash equilibrium. So basically, the essence of it is that you're going to act in our behavior. We're going to act in our own self-interest, as we have been talking about, throughout this whole book. And so, if you don't know, so if the problem is if you don't know what the other person is going to do, and you're going to act in your best interest based on not knowing what the other person is going to do, you end up with an outcome that isn't the best outcome for both of you. If you could collude, you could have a better outcome. You both could have a better outcome. But because you don't know what the other person's going to do, you end up acting in your own self-interest, and it ends up in a less favorable outcome than if you could collude. All right, so let me back up here. So this is chapter 15, strategic games. Oh, and I forgot to mention, this is really relevant in oligopolies. So remember, we have perfect competition, monopolistic competition. That's where you differentiate products, oligopolies and monopolies. So with an oligopoly, you just have a few small firms who dominate the industry. So this game theory is really important for oligopolies because they could collude. If they could, if collude, there's few enough companies in a particular industry to where collusion could take place, which is why it's illegal. And so if you can read, if you have time, you can read about some cases where there's been some suits where companies have been taken to court for collusion and fined and so forth, because that's illegal to price fix. All right, so let's take a look at the Nash equilibrium. So the Nash equilibrium is just a pair of strategies, one for each player, in which each strategy is the best response against the other, or your best response, not knowing what the other person is going to do. All right, so now there can be sequential games. So let's talk about this one first. So the basic Nash equilibrium, which is a prisoner's dilemma, leads to outcomes that reduce both players' payoffs. If they could cooperate, it would improve both players' payoffs. But it's just a one-time game. They get in this chapter, they get into repeated games. So if you can repeat these games, and then they would punish somebody who didn't play along, there's various rules, and it gets a lot more complicated. We're not going to get into the repeated games. I just want you to understand the basics. What is game theory? What's the Nash equilibrium? And if you can explain the outcomes in a prisoner's dilemma. So we're going to go over the example of the prisoner's dilemma, and then we're going to go over a few more examples using that Nash equilibrium prisoner's dilemma in business. Okay, so I'm going to skip to the prisoner's dilemma, which is the basic explanation of game theory and this Nash equilibrium. So that is up here. Right here. Okay, so this is the basic prisoner's dilemma game to explain the Nash equilibrium. All right, so two suspects who robbed a bank, Frank and Jesse robbed a bank, but the police don't have any direct evidence. They pick them up on a parole violation. Each parole violation carries a sentence of 2 years, and the U.S. attorney offers both the same deal. So if one confesses, the one who confesses can go free, while the one who receives, or the other one would receive a 10-year jail sentence. If they both confess, they receive 5 years in jail. If neither confesses, they're going to both get 2 years in jail. So if they could be in the same room, if the police would put them in the same room and they could collude, they would say, hey, we should say nothing, because if both of them say nothing, then they're just going to get put in jail for a parole violation and they're only going to get 2 years. That's the best outcome for them to collude and each get the 2 years. But as you know, anytime the police have two suspects, they don't put them in the same room because they don't want them to collude. They separate them. All right, so this is this is the way you would set this up. So here it says we've got Frank and Jesse. If they both confess, they're going to get 5 years. If neither confesses, they're going to get 2 years. Okay. If one confesses and the other says nothing, the one who confesses gets nothing, 0 years, and the one who says nothing gets 10 years. Okay, so you have to set this up first. Okay, now we're going to figure out what is the best decision for each of these people based on what the other person's going to do, based on what you think the other person's going to do. Okay, so Frank is in red, Jesse's in blue. So let's go to Jesse first, or I'm sorry, let's start with Frank. Okay, if Frank thinks that Jesse's going to confess, here's Frank in the red. If Frank thinks that Jesse's going to confess, that's on this row, what should Frank do? Well, if he thinks Jesse's going to confess and he confesses, he's going to get 5 years. So if you want to write this down on paper, circle this 5. Okay, that's his best outcome there. If Frank thinks that Jesse's going to confess, if he confesses, he gets 5 years. But if Frank says nothing and Jesse confesses, he gets 10 years. So based on these two options, it's in Frank's best interest to confess. So circle that. Okay, what if Frank's going to say nothing? Well, if Frank says nothing and Jesse says nothing, I'm sorry, if Frank says nothing, if Jesse says nothing and Frank confesses, he gets 0 years. He gets to go scot-free. So if Frank says nothing, it's in Frank's best interest to confess right here. Because if Jesse says nothing and Frank says nothing, then Frank's going to get 2 years. So you see here, if he's got this choice, if Jesse says nothing between confessing or saying nothing, and it's in his best interest to confess, because then he'll get to go scot-free. So you should have these two things circled. It's in Frank's best interest to confess each time. All right, now let's go to Jesse. All right, so Jesse says, if Frank's going to confess, what should I do? If I confess, I get 5 years. If I say nothing, I get 10. So I'm going to confess. So you should circle this. Okay. If Frank's going to say nothing, what should Jesse do? If Jesse says nothing, he gets 2 years. But if Jesse confesses, he gets nothing. He gets to go scot-free. So you should have this one circled. All right. So your two circles are in here. So that's the Nash equilibrium. They both are going to end up confessing because it's in their best interest to do so based on not knowing what the other person is going to do. And so they each get 5 years. However, if they could collude, this is the best outcome, to just get 2 years by saying nothing. All right, so that is your Nash equilibrium. That's called, and it's in the prisoner's dilemma game, the classic prisoner's dilemma game. All right, so let's look at some business examples and calculate the Nash equilibrium. All right, so this is Pepsi and Coke, two competitors in an oligopoly, and they are competing on price. Both firms would like to charge a high price, but if they coordinate and collude and price fix, that's a violation of an antitrust law. So they can't collude, and so they are going to charge the best price that they can, given what they think the other person is going to do, and not knowing what the other person is going to do. All right, so let's just say this is millions of dollars. If both Coke and Pepsi charge the high price, they each get $2 million in profit. if they both charge the low price, let's say this is abnormal profit. Remember back to chapter 2 or 3. So this would be above a normal rate of return, 2 million above normal rate of return. If they charge a low price, they're just going to get their normal regular profit, no abnormal profit. If one charges a high price and the other charges a low price, they can make the one who charges the low price can make 4 million. The one charging the high price is going to lose 2 million. All right. So this is if Pepsi charges a low price and Coke charges a high price. This is if Coke charges a low price and Pepsi charges a high price. All right. So let's take a look at this. Let's start with Coke. What are they going to do based on what they think Pepsi might do? Well, if Pepsi charges a low price, their choice is to charge a low price or a high price. So if Pepsi charges a low price and Coke goes with the high price, obviously demand is, we have to assume that demand is fairly elastic here. Now, you could argue this, I mean, forget about all the numbers. You could argue this and say, well, people are really brand loyal to Coke and Pepsi, so they won't substitute. But that's not that's not the issue here. That's not in the discussion here. We're just strictly looking at this game theory. But anyway, back to this. So if Pepsi is charging a low price, it's in Coke's best interest to charge a low price, because they'll lose money if they charge a high price. So they're going to pick right here, charge a low price. If Pepsi is going to charge the high price, well, Coke could charge a high price too and make $2 million. But if Coke undercuts them and charges a low price, they can make 4 million. All right, so you should have these two circled. Okay, now let's see what Pepsi's going to do based on what Coke does. So if Pepsi thinks that Coke is going to charge a low price, then Pepsi will lose money if they charge a high price, so they have to charge the low price right here. If Pepsi thinks that Coke is going to charge a high price, they can make a bunch of money if they charge the low price. So they're going to charge the low price here. All right, so you end up with a Nash equilibrium of just making a normal profit, no excess profit. But if they could collude, they both could make $2 million, which this is the best situation for them to collude, but because they don't know what the other is going to do, they're afraid they'll be undercut. They both charge the low price. Okay, let's go to this is the last one right here. This is on advertising. So here you've got two tobacco companies, Philip Morris and RJR Reynolds. Now, they would both love to not advertise. Advertising is expensive. If neither of them advertise, they could both make, let's go with the $2 million again, same numbers. They could both make $2 million in excess profit. That would be great. You can also, you can also change this. Instead of advertising, you can change it to research and development. They both would like to not do any research and development because that's expensive, and make the $2 million a piece. But they don't know what the other is going to do, and they don't want to be undercut. So they end up both advertising or both doing research and development. That could be another example of the research and development versus advertising. Okay, so anyway, let's go back. Let's do this game theory one more time. Prisoner's dilemma. All right, so Philip Morris or RJ, what is RJ Bar? What is Reynolds going to do if they think Philip Morris is going to advertise? Well, if RJ advertises, they make just regular profit. If they don't advertise, though, they're going to lose 2 million. So if Philip Morris is going to advertise, RJ Reynolds has to advertise. If Philip Morris isn't going to advertise, well, they cannot advertise too and make 2 million. But if they advertise and Philip Morris doesn't, they can make 4 million. So they're going to do this. So they're going to advertise either way. Now, Philip Morris if RJR Reynolds is going to advertise, then if they don't advertise, they're going to lose 2 million. So they've got to advertise right here. If RJR doesn't advertise, Philip Morris would like to not advertise, but if they do advertise, they can make 4 million. So they're going to do this. So again, you have the two, you've got your two circles, two things circled here. So they're both going to advertise. Okay, and that is, that's it for this chapter. So there's on the homework, you're going to see there's a problem where you have to draw the graph and calculate the prisoner's dilemma. And then on the test, there will be, there'll be a question about the prisoner's dilemma as well. So just make sure you understand this and just contact me if you have any questions. All right, and that's it. And this is the last synopsis for the course. Take care.